I'm Emily Cheng, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, IBM records its 22nd quarter of declining revenue. But there are bright spots in Big Blue's third quarter picture. We'll break down today's earnings report. Plus, the inside track on Travis Kalanick's future and Uber's bumpy year from one of the startup's most prominent board members. My exclusive interview with Arianna Huffington from here at the WSJ D Live Tech Conference in Laguna Beach, California. And ZTE doubles down in the race to launch America's first smartphone tablet hybrid. But will U.S. markets buy in? CEO Cheng joins us to discuss strategy and the technology behind its foldable smartphone. But first, to our lead. Big Blue's strong earnings report. IBM sales beat analyst estimates, sending shares higher in late U.S. trading. The tech giant's positive results were lifted by growth from its software products. Revenue was more than $19 billion in the period. Joining us now from New York, Forrester Vice President and Principal Analyst Andrew Bartels. Andrew, however, the not-so-great news, the 22nd quarter of revenue decline in a row. When can IBM break this cycle?
I think that it's getting close to turning the quarter, but not turning the quarter yet. I'd say sometime in 2018 is probably when it's going to actually start to grow revenues again. One of the positives is about 45% of its revenues are coming from its strategic initiatives, and that grew about 10%. If it can just push that up to maybe 12, 15% growth, and if it can bump that up, that'll be what it takes to move it towards growing revenues again.
So what sector do you expect that growth to come from? Is it the cloud? I mean, cloud revenue was up 20% year over year.
It's going to come primarily from software. Software clearly is IBM's most profitable sector. It's been growing a lot. Interestingly, though, its analytics were only up about 5%. Its big growth actually came in security, up 50%. Remember, for IBM, IBM doesn't do simple. IBM does complex. And so it has a slow cycle of getting companies to buy its complex solutions. And I think it's trying to turn the corner now and getting enough clients willing to engage with it on those complex solutions. We'll start to see that software growth plus its services growth really maybe kick over to positive territory, as I said, sometime in 2018.
IBM had a bit of a halo thanks to Buffett's endorsement, but Berkshire Hathaway is no longer the largest shareholder in IBM. How does that impact the company?
I think that Buffett obviously does provide a positive glow on things. I'm not sure how that's going to play with investors, though. I think certainly investors have been patient, but a little bit tired. They're really looking not so much for what other investors are doing, they're looking for what is the company actually going to do in terms of generating that revenue growth. And I think it's getting close. It's not quite there yet.
Watson and blockchain are two bets that IBM is making on the future. When will these bets pay off, and how big will they actually be?
Both will take a while. Blockchain in particular is probably maybe 4 or 5 years from really starting to gain real traction. There's some niche benefits from it, but not really driving. Watson, I think, is more of a halo that they're using to wrap around a lot of things. Watson has a lot of complexity to it, and it's hard to implement in a lot of categories. That's why I said it works best with large companies who are willing to take the time to help Watson get trained to tackle their complex problems that they have. I don't know if Watson knows it's going to be necessarily the key generator of revenue growth. It's going to be a core factor. But a lot of the AI technology is going to end up being sold as kind of middleware to other companies as opposed to a real revenue generator itself. And I think that's going to be the secret for IBM. How can it turn the Watson technologies into technologies that other companies then use and embed in their products? And that's going to be the revenue growth, I think, for Watson.
Meantime, Bloomberg estimates that IBM won't get back to growth until 2019. What do you want to see IBM do between now and then?
I think that the key thing is to keep focusing on its software. Certainly cloud is a part of it, but IBM is lagging behind Amazon and Microsoft and Google in terms of revenue growth. That 20% is not that impressive compared to them. I think that what it needs to stick with what it knows best, which is how do we get these large organizations, its large clients, to get deeper into IBM, to use us more aggressively, to use IBM more aggressively, and to solve more complex problems. It's that slow sales path I think it's going to take to really get this off. But I think it's getting close to that level where it finds that those clients willing to make that big commitment, make those million-dollar deals with IBM, which is going to start turning the corner and turn it into revenue growth. I think 2018 is realistic. 2019, I think, certainly by then.
All right, Forrester Vice President and Principal Analyst Andrew Bartels. Andrew, thanks so much for weighing in. Well, the head of Facebook's secretive Building 8 lab, Regina Dugan, has left the company to lead a new project. In a Facebook post, Dugan said in part, "The timing feels right to step away and be purposeful about what's next, thoughtful about new ways to contribute in times of disruption." Dugan was at the company for about 18 months, helping to push projects ranging from a video chat device to a way to type from brain waves. She said that she'll work with company's leadership over the next few months to ensure a smooth transition. Coming up, we will speak to an Apple analyst who upgraded the stock this week after downgrading the company back in June. We'll ask him what's changed for the iPhone maker. And Bloomberg Technology is live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV weekdays, 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg. For the iPhone X is building to fever pitch this year. Its $1,000 price tag may seem steep to some, but KeyBanc analyst Andy Hargreaves upgraded Apple stock recently because that high price point will bring in more profits per customer. Andy joins us now from Portland to explain. So, Andy, why reverse your earlier decision?
Yeah, I mean, our previous sector weight call was based on unit concern, and I think we just came to the conclusion that, as you pointed out, the higher price, the change to the structure of pricing for storage would drive gross profit per user higher, and that would effectively outweigh the unit concern that we had.
So talk to us about the greater pricing power you see here when it comes to the iPhone X.
Yeah, I mean, there's always been an element of elasticity in the iPhone user base. Contrary to most consumer electronics markets, the prices have gone up fairly consistently over the last decade, but it's been a slow, steady march, and then all of a sudden we get to this year, get price raise, obviously very significant one with the iPhone X, but modest price increases for the 8 and 8 Plus too. And I think what we'll see is we'll just start segmenting out the user base and extracting the maximum gross profit from each of the available segments.
What about some of the downside risks? I mean, are you factoring in this latest move by Qualcomm to try to prevent sales of the iPhone in all of China?
Yeah, I mean, the Qualcomm legal risk is sort of a tail risk to us, meaning the odds are quite low that they're going to be successful in getting injunctions in any single market. So that's not something that we take into huge account. I think the risks that we're more conscious of are the risk of units disappointing and the risk of hitting some elasticity point that we just haven't seen yet.
Are you at all concerned about some of the news we've been hearing of supply chain issues and delays of the iPhone X itself?
Yeah, it's something we're highly conscious of and paying very close attention to on our own part. Supply, though, to us is a transitory issue for the most part. The demand for iPhones usually doesn't go anywhere else because iPhone buyers buy iPhones. They don't buy Android phones. So it would just be a timing issue. Now, if the supply issues manifest into higher costs, then that could be a bigger issue, but we haven't seen that yet.
So beyond the iPhone X, what segment of Apple's business are you most optimistic about? Is it services? I mean, what's going to make up for the rest of the growth?
Well, if we're just being fair, the iPhone still drives the vast majority of gross profit, so that is the sort of 1A and 1B of what we focus on. Services has been growing very, very quickly. I think within that, we're particularly focused on the App Store because to us that's the best business in the services line item. We expect that to slow, but it's still a gem of a business and certainly something that creates a lot of value. And then the watch. I think the watch is sort of regaining some momentum and has a lot of potential.
All right, Andy Hargreaves there from KeyBanc. Andy, thank you so much for joining us. Coming up, Thrive CEO and Uber board member Arianna Huffington gives us insight on Uber's growing board and how its new CEO is holding up. That is next. This is Bloomberg. We're here at the Wall Street Journal D-Live Technology Conference in Laguna Beach, California, where earlier I sat down with Thrive CEO and Uber board member Arianna Huffington. We talked about what could be Uber's most volatile year yet, ever. I asked if Travis Kalanick has a role to play beyond being just a board member. Take a listen.
He is on the board, and he's very active. He obviously built Uber to the juggernaut that it is now, and he passed the baton on to Dara. He was the one who introduced Dara at the All Hands when he took over as CEO, and it was a very nice transition of power, and Dara has been amazing at dealing with all the problems, whether it's what's happening in London with the suspension of Uber's license or the deal that is in process, we hope, with SoftBank. He has been a great leader, confident and willing to show humility in appropriate times, and very committed to building a thriving culture as well as a thriving company.
You mentioned the situation that Uber is facing in London, multiple legal probes elsewhere. What approach do you hope to see Dara take to regulation and the law, really, around the world going forward?
Well, as he said himself in a very beautiful open letter to Londoners, we need to do better at serving the communities where Uber exists around the world. We need to make sure that we add value to communities beyond the value we already add in terms of mobility, in terms of jobs, which is not at all to be underestimated, but we need to also be there for the people we serve, starting with drivers. Mm-hmm. You know, the launch of 180 days of change, which started with allowing tipping for drivers, was intended to rebuild the relationship with drivers.
Would you say that the fractiousness that we saw from the outside on the board is changing, that the board is coming together?
The board is in a good place at the moment. We are now 11, we've grown, and if the SoftBank deal goes through, there are new governance measures that are going to be put in place, which include additional independent board members, an independent chair. All these things are really going to make sure that Uber has a world-class governance ahead of the IPO, which now we are aiming will be before 2019.
And we understand that you became a really close confidant of Travis's as he went through this and the company went through this. What's your relationship with Travis like now?
Travis is a friend, and I'm really excited to see his own journey. You know, he's only 41. He has a lot of life ahead of him, and I look forward to see what he's going to do.
We mentioned Harvey Weinstein earlier. There's a spotlight on sexual harassment, sexual assault, and how men can flagrantly and horrifically abuse their power. Companies still approach sexual harassment in confusing ways. How do we put clearer guardrails around what is tolerated, what is not, and what crosses the line?
I think there are two really important issues here. One is to end the cult of the top performer. You know, there is this cult both in Silicon Valley and in Hollywood and in many other places around the world, where if you are delivering results, if you are delivering great performance, a lot is forgiven you. And the other thing that is really important is for us to break the silence, because people see things and they don't say anything, especially if whoever is involved is someone in a powerful position. And we see that in politics also. I'd love to see more Republicans speaking out about what's happening at the White House. So breaking the silence before there are a few courageous people, like the courageous women who came forward in the Harvey Weinstein case, before it has to come to that point.
You mentioned politics. You speak about an inclusive culture at the same time that our own president seems to be very divisive. What are your biggest concerns now that we're 9 months into this administration?
Well, my biggest concern is that so few Republicans are speaking out. It was great to see Senator McCain last night speaking out. Of course, it's been great to see Senator Corker speaking out. But I think it's so much now up to Republicans, because this is not a partisan issue. It really involves the safety of the country, and we need Republicans, as well as Democrats, of course, but Republicans will have a lot more impact if they speak out about what is happening.
Facebook, Google, and Twitter are now having to answer to Congress about Russian meddling on their platform. What is the responsibility of these companies when it comes to foreign actors weaponizing essentially the tools that they create?
Well, as Sheryl Sandberg said to Mike Allen during their interview last week, it's very important to increase oversight. I mean, Facebook is hiring 4,000 additional people. They're investing more in machine learning to be able to catch, first of all, the creation of these fake accounts, because whatever you think of free speech, nobody wants to see fake accounts being started in order to interfere in our democracy. But I think there is another problem, which is what we are addressing at Thrive Global, which is in the attention economy. A lot of these companies have the incentive to hijack more and more of our attention. And we see that having incredible problems, especially when it comes to teenagers and college students. We saw the article in the New York Times over the weekend about the mental health problems among teenagers increasing dramatically.
So you're announcing a partnership this week with Samsung to turn a smartphone into a dumb phone. What do you mean by that?
So for specified periods of time, when you're having dinner with your family, when you're doing deep work, when you are sleeping, when you don't want to be interrupted, you'll be able to put your phone in what we call Thrive mode. And during that time, you will not be able to receive texts, notifications, calls. You will have a VIP list if you always need to get a call from a child or a spouse. You'll be able to do that. But the two important elements of the app are, one is bidirectional. So if you are in Thrive mode and I try to text you, I'll get that message back and will be told when you'll be out of Thrive mode. And also it will give you a mirror of your social media consumption. So it will tell you, you were on Instagram for 7 hours last week. Would you like to reduce the amount you spend on Instagram or whatever app? And if you decide to, let's say, reduce it to 6, it will give you notifications and then shut you out.
So what's the next step with Thrive? Where do you want to take this?
So Thrive is really two things. One is our work with corporations. You know, we go into companies, we work to improve their culture, improve outcomes in terms of both productivity and well-being. And also we are a media platform which increases awareness around these issues, both by bringing together the latest science and also new role models. There are a lot of people who actually are practicing taking care of themselves, recharging, and then are seeing the impact this has on their productivity and their performance.
That was Thrive CEO Arianna Huffington. Roy Price has resigned as the head of Amazon's movie and TV studio after allegations of sexual harassment. Amazon Studios' chief operating officer Albert Cheng will oversee the studio while Amazon searches for Price's replacement. Price led the e-commerce giant's push into TV and movie production with an estimated budget of $4.5 billion in 2017. Price has not responded to our request for comment. Coming up, Cisco CEO Chuck Robbins joins us from Laguna Beach. Hear his thoughts on the company's push into software and the cloud, plus his predecessor, John Chambers' legacy as he plans to depart the company. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. You can listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on Sirius XM. This is Bloomberg.
Hi, my name's Ashley.
Hello, Ashley. I am a socially intelligent robot.
Ashley Vance is going to the farthest corners of Earth.
This is the UFO.
What am I going to find inside? You get Wi-Fi out here?
To find the mad scientists, the tech geniuses, and the dreamers of tomorrow.
It's about high-tech innovation and doing really, really clever things.
Hello, world. Friday on Bloomberg.
I'm Mark Crumpton in New York. You're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's begin with a check of first word news. Senators have reached a deal to shore up Obamacare markets. Tennessee Republican Lamar Alexander and Washington State Democrat Patty Murray crafted the agreement to continue federal subsidies to insurers for 2 years.
I'm very pleased that in the hearings and discussions with over half the Senate, Chairman Alexander and I were able to find common ground on a number of steps to stabilize the markets and to help protect families from premium spikes as a result of the sabotage we have seen from this administration.
Last week, President Trump signed an executive order blocking the payment of the subsidies. Alexander and Murray still need to secure the support of fellow Republicans and Democrats. President Trump's choice to be drug czar has withdrawn his name from consideration. There were news reports Congressman Tom Marino of Pennsylvania had pushed legislation making it harder for the Drug Enforcement Agency to fight the opioid crisis. Islamic State's self-proclaimed capital in Syria has fallen. A U.S.-backed alliance of Syrian forces says the city of Raqqa has been liberated. However, a coalition spokesman would only say the battle was, quote, near its end. The fight for Raqqa began in June and left thousands of civilians and fighters dead. The United Nations says thousands more Rohingya Muslims are fleeing violence and persecution in Myanmar and crossing into Bangladesh. The agency reports more than 500,000 refugees are already in overcrowded camps. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. It's just after 5:30 p.m. here in New York, 8:30 Wednesday morning in Sydney. My colleague Paul Allen has a look at the markets. Paul, good morning.
Good morning, Mark. Well, of course, we have the Dow at another record close, the S&P pushing higher as well, and West Texas crude at just a shade below $52 a barrel. Not feeling the love in markets here at the moment, though. The NZX been trading for about 30 minutes this Wednesday, currently off about 0.25%. ASX futures also very slightly weaker by 0.1%. We've just had some news from BHP, the world's biggest miner. First quarter iron ore output coming in at 55.6 million tonnes, a little less than the 58.8 million tonnes expected, although copper and petroleum output did beat expectations. We may also see a ruling shortly on a court to rule on a rate fixing by the three big Australian banks, National Australia Bank, ANZ and Westpac. That is expected out later this morning. Big story today, though, the Communist Party Congress in China getting underway. We'll have the keynote opening address from President Xi Jinping in just a few hours' time. I'm Paul Allen in Sydney. More from Bloomberg Technology next.
This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Cheng. We are talking about Cisco. The name of the game the past few years has been transition from legacy hardware to software and services. And that push has been led by my next guest here at the WSJ Digital Conference, Cisco CEO Chuck Robbins, now into your third year as CEO of the company. Right. You're here talking about building the cities of tomorrow and Cisco's role in that. What does that mean, and how does it actually add to Cisco's bottom line?
Well, Emily, first of all, it's great to see you, as always. And you know, what we see happening all around the world, whether it's a company, a city, a country, technology really is at the heart of every strategy. We get that, and cities are no different. So whether it's meeting the objectives that cities have around revenue generation or solving some of the problems they have, like parking or like lighting costs, et cetera, all of those now can be solved or achieved through the use of technology. Just a quick example, I mean, 20% of the lighting cost in the world, or 20% of the energy costs come from lighting. And just by connecting these lights and controlling them more effectively, you can actually reduce that in the cities by 50 to 75%. So there's a tremendous opportunity out there, and the network is at the actual heart of making that happen.
So how do you turn that into a business? Like, when do we see this adding substantially to the bottom line?
Well, we're operating in 120 cities around the world right now, driving projects. We also have digitization agreements with actually 16 countries around the world where we're helping them with education and healthcare. And I think all of it continues to contribute to the transition that you talked about as you opened the show around us moving to more software. We have software platforms in addition to the network. And we have innovation going on across all of these areas in helping the cities actually achieve their objectives. So it's a long road with these businesses, but we think it's going to be a great business for us for a long time.
You've been pretty upfront saying Cisco's not going to stick its neck in the sand and ignore the changing realities of the industry. How would you rate your progress so far, making that transition to becoming the company that you think Cisco needs to be?
Well, I never think we're going fast enough, but I don't think any CEO does. You know, listen, when we started this, we had a couple of big objectives that we wanted to drive. One was this transition to software, and in 8 quarters, our deferred software revenue on our balance sheet doubled from $2.5 billion to $5 billion, so that's pretty significant. You know, we have over a $10 billion software business today. We wanted to also move towards more recurring revenue as a percentage of our business. In last quarter, we exited at 31%, and that was up 4 points from the prior year. And on a big business, that's a big move. In our product revenue, we had over $1 billion of that coming from recurring revenue, which was up 40% year over year, and it's the first time it ever been over $1 billion in a quarter, which represented 11% of the product revenue. So I think we've made a lot of progress there, and we have massive innovation that we've been working on in our core franchises, which was another key objective for us.
When will we see software and services revenue become the driving force of growth for the top line?
Well, I think that if you look right now at where we're headed, I think they are going to be the drivers of growth over the next few years, particularly if you look at the launch that we did this summer. Because one of the things we wanted to do was really re-energize our core franchises and actually bring a software model to our core franchises. And we did that this summer. We launched the very early phases of what we call intuitive networking, which is intent-based networking, which is actually a category. And what it really allows you to do is to take the priorities of your business and drive them through to how you run your infrastructure, as well as drive context out of the infrastructure through analytics. So we've rewritten all of our software. We've got analytics capabilities coming out of every aspect of our technology. And we actually launched a subscription business on top of our core switching platforms, which people didn't think we could do, and we're having really good uptake on that.
You've been aggressive on M&A on a smaller scale. Are you open to larger for-revenue acquisitions?
Well, we're open to any acquisition that aligns strategically where we need to go, whether they're small, large, mid-size, and I've said that repeatedly. It's you know, when we think about innovation, we spend a lot of money on internal R&D, and we really wanted to refocus some of that into our core, which we've done. The M&A engine, I think we've bought somewhere between 15 and 20 companies since I became CEO. We're also driving a lot of really deep strategic partnerships, like what we've done with Apple, what we've done with Inspur, what we've done with Rockwell, and you'll see more and more partnerships coming from us. And one other interesting aspect that we've really begun to implement is co-development, co-innovating with our customers in a very iterative way. And so we'll continue to use all of those depending on what we need.
John Chambers, who was the CEO for many decades before you, will be stepping down from the board at the end of this year. Many of the executives that he hired have also left the company. What does that kind of a sea change mean? What does that signify?
Well, I think, first of all, John was, you know, this was all part of his plan, and he's got so many things he's off doing now. He's into startups and wants to help, you know, drive the startup capacity in the United States. So I think he's going to do great things. But if you look at the leadership team that we put in place, they're we really just needed to ensure that we had the leadership team that really bought into the vision of where we wanted to take the company. I think we have that today, and we're executing really well.
So the Supreme Court just decided to hear Microsoft's case against the DOJ over whether companies can be forced to hand over information on their customers stored on servers outside of the United States. Cisco has backed Microsoft when it comes to this particular case. What are your biggest concerns? I mean, do you worry this could set a precedent?
Well, I don't worry so much about a precedent. My view is the following. Most of these are policy issues. And what I think are that we do support Microsoft in this case, and we believe that the countries need to define what the policies are. And in fact, in this case, we believe the countries that are involved actually need to figure out what are the cross-border data, privacy issues, and how are we going to deal with them. The technology can be deployed in whatever way aligns with the policy, but we've always just viewed this as a policy issue that the governments need to decide.
The tech industry has made some effort to bridge the gap with Washington, and I'm curious, in a Silicon Valley that is largely anti-Trump, have you seen the efforts to engage with the administration actually pay off?
Well, I think if you look at the priorities that are coming out of Washington from a business perspective, we remain very active in Congress. We remain very active on tax reform. We remain very active on discussions around high-skilled immigration, all the things that matter. And there's still, there's tremendous progress. If you look at what's happened with the early framework for tax reform and what we've seen even happen this week, I think they're making progress. And
so
I think
you're happy with what you see?
Well, I'm happy with the business imperatives that they're trying to drive in Washington, absolutely.
What are you unhappy with?
Well, my 16-year-old's latest grades. There's a lot of things to be unhappy about. I think that in Washington, you just have to, it's always a dynamic place. And there's obviously lots of politics, and there's, in my view, more discussion about things that divide us than things that unify us. And I think that, but again, with the approach that was taken on trying to get this process for corporate tax reform done, it was done across the House, it was done across, the Senate, as well as the executive branch. And I think that was, that's promising. So we're hopeful.
All right, Chuck Robbins, CEO of Cisco. Always great to have you here on the show. Thanks so much for stopping by.
Thanks.
All right, coming up, there is a new combatant in the smartphone wars, and it's bringing a new feature you won't find in any of its competitors. What ZTE has in store. Next, this is Bloomberg. ZTE is looking to put a dent in the U.S. smartphone market. And it wants to do so by offering a new mobile device that can do something its rivals, like Apple and Samsung, cannot. Take a look. It's been a big year already for smartphone announcements, and another company is looking to make a bold move into the U.S. market. Chinese manufacturer ZTE is doubling down on a foldable dual-screen smartphone called the Axum M, a 6.75-inch screen that lets you stream video while still ordering food at the same time.
This is a kind of an innovative product. We think this points to a new area, a foldable area.
Closed, the phone measures just about half an inch thick, still not as thin as an iPhone. The camera also features a Qualcomm Snapdragon 821 processor chip, an expandable memory, and a 20-megapixel camera. ZTE currently occupies 4th place in the U.S. smartphone market, but has yet to crack the top 5 worldwide. They've gained that market share selling their handsets in conjunction with low-cost mobile carriers like Boost Mobile and Cricket Wireless. But this new phone will be available exclusively with AT&T.
ZTE, this is a big win. Because ZTE, they used to provide lots of prepaid low-cost models to U.S. market. But now this is the first model hitting postpaid, high-end market.
But the question remains, will this be enough to lure people away from the likes of Samsung and Apple? Joining me now to discuss this new smartphone, the CEO of ZTE Mobile Devices, Cheng. So, Cheng, why take this direction, the 2 screens in particular?
Nice to see you again, Emily. So this is, the world is too big for a single screen now. Since the first iPhone was launched 10 years ago, and consumers' behavior has changed. and they are living in a new multitasking world. So with ZTE, we want to bring the tomorrow's technology today. So we bring this foldable smartphone, which is able to addressing the multitasking need for the consumers. The group consumers, we call it mobile revolutionary. And this is multitasking, multifunction, delivered by multi-modes through this Axon M.
Do you think the dual screen experience is enough to overcome the potential drawbacks, like the thickness, like the lack of a second camera?
The key thing is that the consumer behavior is already there. So they're only limited by the current form factor of the smartphone. And when we go into the group of consumers called mobile revolutionaries, they really so excited about the feature we are delivering. You saw on the video, there is a couple of demonstrations of different modes already. But I have this on my hand with Bloomberg preloaded on this. I think how easy it is. This is a mirror mode. I just studied this Bloomberg technology, and you see, this is I can share this with you. Can you see it? Yeah. Can you see this? So.
I can picture what you're showing me, Lixin.
Yeah. So it's.
I'm curious. This strategy is a departure from what made ZTE successful, in part, prepaid markets, low-cost carriers. Why do you think this will succeed in the United States?
Because the key things for our success in the segment below $200 is the innovation around the consumer needs. We put the consumer at the heart of everything we design, build, and the delivery. So we study the consumer behavior. What is the frustration they have today? Is that they are multitasking, but they have to switch between apps so often, and then the current form factor of smartphone is limiting. And plus, the hardware evolution during the last 10 years is great. Another very important thing is the LTE network. It's covering every corner around the world. Very soon, it's going to deliver 1 gigabit per second, streaming while texting, and browsing while shopping, and watching the two basketball games of your favorite teams together as different games. And you don't want to miss any shot while you share the moment with through Snapchat with your friends. All these things there. So this is perfect, with dual screen and foldable. And then plus, when you fold it, you will see that it will be exactly the same traditional smartphone.
Okay. ZTE Chairman and CEO Cheng with a new approach. We will be watching. Thanks so much for joining us. Coming up, we hit the road with General Motors President Dan Ammann. Details on when GM may start to see a payoff from ride-sharing investments. That's next. This is Bloomberg. Dropbox has introduced a new cloud-based file sharing option for individual businesses and a new feature for marketing and creative workers to share projects. The company is trying to woo more paying customers ahead of an anticipated IPO, which could come this year. The San Francisco-based company wants to boost revenue by providing new programs to help better compete with Google and Microsoft. Automation in the driver's seat. The buzz surrounding GM's self-driving plans have given shares of the automaker a boost. Shares are up nearly 45% over the last year. A recent bullish call from a Deutsche Bank analyst anticipates a $30 billion business coming from GM's self-driving and shared cars. I sat down with GM President Dan Ammann here at the WSJ D-Live conference and asked him about the analyst's call.
We actually think one of the big advantages we have today is that we have everything integrated under one roof. We have the advanced software engineering capability, the vehicle engineering and integration, the vehicle manufacturing piece, and what's allowing us to move as quickly as we are is actually having all that capability under one roof, which is giving us a real speed advantage, and that's the way that we'll be proceeding for the time.
So are you saying that spinning out the mobility business is not an option now? That's not something you'd consider?
All of our focus right now is on moving as fast as we can to get to commercial deployment of this technology technology in the safest way possible. And we believe the best way to do that is having all the capability under one roof.
So investors are finally starting to realize GM's ability to diversify, perhaps better so than other automakers, be it through electrification, ride sharing, self-driving cars. These things, though, are still fairly far out into the future. How do they all come together for you, and when?
Sure. So there's a lot of linkage. If you think about shared mobility, you think about autonomous, the intersection of those, we believe that all autonomous vehicles will be electric vehicles. So there's another intersection with electrification there. And it's back to this theme of having all of the capability that we have under one roof gives us a real advantage in how fast we're moving and how quickly we can bring this technology to fruition and get it deployed commercially.
You've made a big strategic investment in Lyft. How do you leverage what you've learned there, and what have you learned?
Sure. So we've had a very productive investment and relationship with Lyft. That has given us a lens and perspective into the ride-sharing business. And as I said, we think it's really at the very, very early stages of shared mobility, of ride-sharing, the intersection of autonomous. We're just at the beginning, and there's much more to come.
Uber has obviously had some struggles over the last several months. Do you see an opportunity there?
In what sense?
An opportunity to take advantage of perhaps a weekness that Uber might have now in the market.
I think we see ride-sharing overall, and the intersection of autonomous with ride-sharing is really, that's how the big opportunity comes together. Ride-sharing today accounts for 0.1% of all miles traveled. So we've still got 99.9% of the opportunity yet to come. So it's really early days. We think the autonomous technology that we will bring to fruition is key to unlocking a lot of that next set of opportunities.
What's the likelihood of you deepening your partnership with Lyft, or perhaps buying Lyft outright?
We have a lot of options in terms of how we can go to market. We can go to market, through our own network capability. We can go to market through different partnerships. So I'd say all options are open at this time.
So how do you decide which is the best? I mean, at what point do you, now that you've learned all of this, do you make a decision about how to move forward?
I'd say the closer the technology comes to being ready for commercial deployment, the more clarity will come around that picture.
When it comes to electrification, what battery cost will make them profitable?
We can talk about cost per kilowatt hour, but what really matters is to get the total vehicle profitable there. We do believe in an all-electric future at General Motors, and we believe in order for that to come to fruition over time, we need to get the costs of battery electric cars down to be in line or better than internal combustion engine cars. And that's the journey that we're on as a company to make sure we have the technical capability to solve that problem.
So how close are you to breaking even there?
We still have a little bit of work to go.
So I'm curious, when it comes to self-driving cars, GM has been able to move faster than I think a lot of people might have expected. When you say self-driving cars will be on the road in larger numbers in a few years, what do you mean by a few years?
I mean,
give us some more details on the timeline.
I can't really get more specific than that at this point in time, but the only thing I'd say is that things are moving really quickly. We believe we have an interesting approach in terms of having all the capability integrated in one place, and that's giving us an ability to move at speed. And we feel that we really have an obligation to bring this technology to commercial deployment as soon as possible because of the significant impact it can make on improving road safety.
That was GM President Dan Ammann there. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology, live from the WSJD conference in Laguna Beach. On Wednesday's show, we'll be back in San Francisco speaking with Pinterest President Tim Kendall and outline the company's plan to lure more brands to take out ads on the site. And a reminder, we are live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV, weekdays, 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. That is all for now. This is Bloomberg.